Today we want to welcome author Lou Anders to PSJA ISD. Lou is the author of the adventure series Thrones and Bones, and he has two books currently out, Frostborn and Nightborn, which many of our students are enjoying reading. And he's here to tell us more about his series filled with dragons, trolls, and other creatures. Welcome to PSJA ISD, Lou.
Thank you. It's wonderful to be here. The whole week has been tremendous. I really want to thank PSJI for having me out, and also Penguin Random House, my publisher, for funding the tour.
Okay, so what do you want our readers to know about your series Thrones and Bones?
Well, Thrones and Bones is a fantasy series that's written for both boys and girls equally. It stars a boy who comes from a kind of Viking culture who meets a girl whose father was a frost giant. So at 12 years old, she is 7 feet tall. But where she's from, that is short, and she's still picked on for her height and for being different. And I wrote the book because I kind of wanted to write the kind of fantasy story that I enjoyed as a child, but for kids today, and that meant boys and girls.
So your story features a lot of history, it features a lot of mythology. What was some of the inspiration behind Thrones and Bones?
Well, to begin with, I did a lot of research in the Norse culture. I looked up the Vikings, Viking history, Viking mythology. They have a lot of fun, uniquely Viking monsters. Viking dragons are called linorms, and they're long, snake-like creatures. There are trolls, which I'm sure everybody knows from the film Frozen. But trolls are a uniquely Norwegian monster, and they have these things called draug, like sauerkraut, which are undead Viking warriors that live in the grave and mess with people when they come by.
So you did a lot of research.
Tons of research. Yeah. I researched for 3 months before I ever started writing the plot.
Your two main characters, you have Theanna and Karn. Theanna is half giant, half human, and Karn is a farm boy / gamer. So tell me more, how did you come up with these characters?
Well, in a lot of children's books, the girl character is always pushed to the level of being a sidekick. They want the girl to be the magical one, or the careful one, or the cautious one. And I want a girl that would be a full-on lead character who could be tough and rough and kick down the door and knock heads together. And so I came up with the idea of Theanna as a half giant, as a 7-foot-tall 12-year-old. And then I needed a boy to be the opposite of that. And I wanted him to be passionate about something, but he's not athletic, and he's more clever, and he's more cautious. I wanted him to have things he was passionate about too, and I chose board games. The Vikings were actually really, really big on board games, on table games. And I imagine that gamers today, kids playing video games, kids in the past had the same passion for their games that kids today have. And so I wrote him to be a fantasy equivalent of a modern-day Game Boy.
Were the characters based on actual people that you know?
They were not based on actual people, although I wrote the big, tough, aggressive girl and the clever gamer boy. My son read the book and he said, "Dad, you just wrote about my sister and I." He's 10, she's 6, but I'm constantly saying, let your brother up, don't beat up your brother, get off your brother's back. Son, if you put your head in front of her face, in front of her foot, you deserve what you get. And I think I did, in a way, write about them. But another reason that I wrote the book is my wife is from China and my children are biracial. And I wanted to write about a character who came from two cultures so that they could have heroes that reflected their own experience. And that's why I came up with the idea of a girl who sits between a human culture and a giant culture, so that they would have a hero.
And how did they like that idea?
They liked it a lot, and a lot of kids that I'm talking to like that idea a lot. I grew up reading fantasy novels, and I loved them, but they are not reflective of the world as it is. But I wanted to write a fantasy novel that had parts for girls and parts for other types of people and cultures.
To inspire your readers.
Absolutely.
The Thrones and Bones is the name of your series. It's also the game that Karn plays in the book. How did you come up with the concept of the game? Explain the idea behind it.
Well, in real life, the Vikings played a board game called, this is hard to say, called Hnefatafel. When he was younger, my son couldn't pronounce it, so he called it Knuffle Bunnies. And
close
nobody
enough.
knows, close enough, right? Nobody knows how Knuffle Bunnies was played. We know they played it because they wrote songs and stories about it. There are groups online that have tried to reconstruct the rules. And when I started writing the book, I thought I could just borrow from that. I thought I didn't have to know the game myself. And as I kept writing, I realized that the game was going to become way more important to the plot and to the characters, and I had to know the rules. And I sat down with it, and I didn't find that any of the rules satisfied my needs. So I went to a craft store and I bought a bunch of wooden boards and wooden dowels and paint pens, and I made a set. And then I spent a week working out my own version of rules for a game, which isn't Hnefatafel, but is similar. You could imagine it as a fantasy world's equivalent. And I'm very lucky in that my two oldest nephews are chess champions in the state of Alabama, where I'm from. took them to Starbucks, bought them coffees, sat them down with the game, and let them play each other. They played for 3 hours, and they pronounced it good, and I knew I had something.
The game has kind of been a hit on its own. From what I understand, you have readers creating their own versions of it.
Yes, we put the rules for the game in the back of the book, and kids all over the United States and in England are making sets based on those rules and sending me the photographs, which is wonderful. And there'll be a new game in the back of the book too. There's a game called Charioteers in Nightborn, and there's a game, I won't say what it's called yet because that would be a spoiler, but there will be a game in the back of book 3 as well.
A lot of students are interested in writing. What inspired you to become a writer? Tell me a little bit more about your background.
Well, I grew up in Alabama, and I didn't fit in very well with some of the culture there. And so everyone said, oh, you're a writer. That was the only thing they knew. They didn't know that there was anything else you could be. If you were different, you must be a writer. And so my whole life I was told I was a writer, and I kind of resisted it for a while.
You've also had an interesting career where you've worked, your background has kind of let you work in different fields.
I've done a little bit of everything. After college, I lived in London for a while and studied acting, and then I directed and wrote late-night black box theater in Chicago for 2 years. I moved to Los Angeles after that, and I worked as a journalist on television sets. I hung out on the sets of Babylon 5 and Star Trek Deep Space Nine for 5 years, just living on the set and talking to the cast and crew. During that time, I learned how to write screenplays. I wrote screenplays with a partner. We never had anything made to a movie, but we had some things bought, and I learned how to screenwrite. Then I worked in the .com industry, and then I got into publishing in 2001. And for the last 15 years, I've been an editor and art director in the adult science fiction fantasy field, and I just quit that last September to write full-time.
How long have you been writing and working on the Thrones and Bones series?
Ooh, I had the idea of the half-giant girl back in 2010, and I started writing her as an adult character, and it went nowhere. It was pretty bad. And I realized I didn't know enough about her. And when I started thinking about her, I thought, well, she probably had a pretty miserable childhood growing up half size of everyone else. And that's when I knew that was the story. The story wasn't about the adult, the story was about the child. And that's when the story came to me.
So for students that are interested in becoming writers or writing their own work, what advice would you give them?
Read everything, not just the stuff you like, but everything. Study lots and lots and lots of history. Because if you copy my book, it's illegal. But if you copy history, it's free. So read as much history as you can.
Inspiration.
Yes. There are tons of stories there, and they're all for the taking.
Okay, well, you have a lot of fans here at PSJA ISD, and we have some students who want to ask you a few questions. First up is Madeline. She's a 5th grade student.
Hi, my name is Madeline Venegas, and I have a question for Lou Anders, the author of Thrones and Bones. What inspired you to make the Thrones and Bones a book?
Well, thank you, Madeline. That's a very good question. I wanted to write a book for both of my kids. I have a boy and a girl, and I wanted to write a fantasy adventure novel of the kind that I grew up reading, but one that both boys and girls could read and enjoy. I didn't want to write a boy book or a girl book. I want to write a book for everybody, for both my kids and all the kids everywhere.
And now we have Michael from PSJ North Early College High School.
My name is Michael Van Nest, and my question is, what character did you enjoy writing the most for?
Hi, Michael. I think I enjoyed writing the dragon the most. When I was a kid, I saw the 1979 animated Hobbit movie, and a man named Richard Boone did the voice of the dragon. And when I was little, he defined dragons for me for all time. And when I set out to write this book, I wanted to write a dragon that was as cool and majestic as that dragon, but wasn't a carbon copy of it. And I worked very, very hard to come up with the voice of the dragon and the attitude of the dragon. And I think the dragon is one of my favorite things to do.
Can you do the voice of the dragon for us?
I can do the voice of the dragon. When I knew I was going to read that passage, I practiced my dragon voice for a long time. My dragon, when I read, sounds like this. I do so love visitors, but they come so seldom these days. It's been simply ages since I ate the last one. But I have a secret, which is that in my mind, that is not how he sounds. In my mind, he sounds like David Bowie.
And now Jesus from PSJ North has a question.
Hi, my name is Jesus Villar. How is the progress in your second book in the series?
Thank you for asking, Jesus. The second book is out, The third book, which is going to be called Skyborn, I just handed in 2 weeks ago. So it is also done, and now I'm thinking about new stories.
And I know a lot of our young readers will want to know, what is the third book about? Can you tell us just a little bit about it?
Just a little bit. In the third book, Fiona finds out where her mother comes from. And it's a country that I have modeled on ancient Greece. But it's an ancient Greece in kind of its high Middle Ages. And she finds out that her mother's people are not necessarily the nicest bunch. And I get to have a lot of fun with Greek mythology. There's Minotaur and Chimera. Every time I do a school visit and I ask what's the monster on the cover of book 2, and it's a manticore, the kids say, is it a chimera? Is it a chimera? And so many kids have mistakenly said it was a chimera that I decided I'd put a chimera in book 3 for them.
Giving the readers what they want.
Exactly.
So the adventure continues.
It does. Oh, yes.
Mauricio's up next.
My name is Mauricio Alanis. I am in 5th grade at Marcia Eric Garza. Who is your hero?
Thank you, Mauricio. This may surprise you, but my hero is Kermit the Frog. If you remember, Kermit the Frog grew up in Florida. He's a fellow Southerner like I am. He left the swamps and moved all the way out to California, just like I did when I was younger, with the dream of entertaining people. But along the way, he stopped entertaining people, and instead, he became a facilitator of other people's dreams. He got all the other Muppets around him, and he did whatever it takes to make sure that they could reach their dreams. For 15 years, I edited books that other people wrote. Recently, Kermit the Frog came out of behind-the-scenes retirement and starred in his own movie, Muppets Unwanted. And when I saw Kermit the Frog having the guts to put himself forward again and do what it was he originally went for, starring in Muppets Unwanted, I said, if the frog can do it, I can do it. And that's when I started writing my book. So my hero is Kermit the Frog.
And Destiny has the last question for you, Lou.
I'm Destiny Alonso. I'm in 5th grade at Marcia Garza Elementary. What do you like to do for fun?
Thank you, Destiny. I like to play video games for fun. I play video games on my lunch hour every day to keep me in a fantasy mood.
Thank you so much, Lou, for joining us and for telling us all about your series, Thrones and Bones.
Well, it has been my pleasure, and I have to say the students that I have met on this tour have been fantastic. They've been some of the best kids I've talked to all over the United States. I want to thank all the kids, all the librarians and teachers. I want to thank Penguin Random House for sending me out, and everybody. And kids, keep reading. Thank you very much.
And if kids want more, where can they go?
Well, if they go online to thronesandbones.com, there's a fabulous website there with character art, full-color maps. They can listen to an audiobook sample, they can read a sample, they can read more about the world. There's a teacher-educator's guide, and there is a game, an online game they can play. So go to thronesandbones.com for more.
Thank you, Lou, for joining us. If you'd like to pick up his series, Thrones and Bones, the books are available at our school libraries, bookstores everywhere, and also online.